Welcome to another special episode of our Capital Ideas podcast, part of our limited series, The Power of Advice. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Larry Culp, Chairman and CEO of GE Aerospace. I'm going to talk to Larry about his team-first mindset, the impact of his sensei, his time on the ground in GE's manufacturing facilities, connecting with the people and the process. Larry, welcome to The Power of Advice. Before we jump into Larry Culp, the CEO, I want to talk about Larry Culp, the individual, who I've gotten to know well, and I'm excited about that. Your grandfather, he founded a small welding and machine shop, and your mom and dad also helped run that business. Can you tell a little bit early on how that informed you?
Sure, Mike. Obviously good to be with you here today. My grandfather founded a small business back in 1938 in Silver Spring, Maryland, just over the line between DC and Maryland. I didn't know it at the time, but it really did seed for me, I think, the interest just in business, right? Trying to take care of customers, trying to take care of your own folks, and have something at the end of the day that represented marginal bit of profit. Yeah. I think the other thing that helped me really appreciate is just the wonder, but also the challenge of running a small business. Right. I mean,
resources and all the things you need to do to run a very small business.
Exactly. And you don't have the scale that your firm, our company has. It's just very different. And it was, I think, good to be rooted in some of those fundamentals at an early age.
Two people who I have a lot of respect for, Martin Jacobs, one of our investment professionals, and my brother David, who's the CEO of a publicly traded company. Both of them said, Larry Culp's the best CEO in the country, which is high praise. So I want to take you back a little bit pre-GE to Danaher, which I know is super special to you. Sure. You were there for a long time. You were CEO for 13, 14 years?
Yes.
What made Danaher so special to you?
Well, I was there 25 years, and it was a phenomenal experience start to finish. I think what made Danaher different is that we really were on the vanguard of adopting lean and all of the Toyota production system principles throughout our business. Like most companies, we started on the factory floor, but it soon spread like wildfire to every corner of the business.
Right.
And I think that enabled us to stay focused on customers, to drive continuous improvement, build our businesses, and in turn, frankly, throw off not only profit, but cash flows that allowed us to reinvest in the business. And investors like Capital and others gave us that license, not only to operate the businesses that we had well, but to add to the portfolio. And that was just a process that we built, improving it every year, that stood the test of time.
And it did. It compounds. When you build that capacity to reinvest in your highest priorities, there's a compounding effect of that that's super powerful. And you've done that your entire career. You did retire from Danaher, and you had a brief 3-4 year retirement.
Yeah.
Were you a good or bad retiree? Like, did you enjoy it? Did you embrace it? How'd you find that experience?
Mike, I got the CEO job at Danaher at 38. And I knew
That's super early.
And I knew that, well, first of all, I had to get through the first couple of years, right, to show that I could do it. There were people who thought I was too young, it was too early. But I also knew that I wouldn't be one of those people that they were dragging out right after his or her last breath. So when I retired, I was sure I was never going to have a full-time job again. And I think I had a great retirement there. I had an operating principle, which I call the 3 Fs: family, friends, and fun. Obviously, things played out differently through the course of 2018, but I was, I think, a very good retiree.
Right. So
I don't know what my family or friends would say, but that's my
We'll get them on the podcast and interview them. In 2018, you became the CEO of General Electric. And it was the third time, I think, that you were asked that you said yes. So why'd you ultimately say yes? And did you have an advisor to you in the process to give you advice? Because sometimes folks like you are the advisor. You don't have a lot of great advisors.
Right.
How did it come about that you said yes, and who gave you advice?
Well, 2018 played out in a way, again, that I didn't expect. I joined the board in May of that year, became lead director in the summer. And then through the course of July and August, the board was thinking about the leadership equation going forward. The board came to me twice. I said, no, thank you. I'm happily retired. But the third time around, having consulted with my wife, who I think could see that I saw a path forward, My good friend Truman Siemens in Baltimore helped me understand that this is a company that is of great national importance.
Yeah.
So you put that together, right? I'd studied GE my entire life. I'd admired the company. It clearly at that point in time was at least the industrial challenge of our generation. And as Truman said, it was important to the country, I would say the world. The only person I consulted that didn't think it was a great idea was my father-in-law,
Right.
who had spent his entire career at Westinghouse.
There you go. Fair enough.
But otherwise, between
I didn't know that. That's funny.
between Wendy and Truman, they gave me the nudge.
Well, GE was super lucky that you said yes, and so were our shareholders, because Capital Group was a large shareholder of GE through this whole period of time. Let's talk a little bit about lean. You are, I think, well known as an expert in the concept of lean. But for some of our viewers and listeners who don't really know about the Toyota production system and lean, talk a little bit about it and why it can change a company and a mindset within a company.
Sure. Well, I think when people first come to lean, they think about manufacturing. They think about just in time. They think about flow. And they're not wrong. That's exactly what you'd see at a Toyota manufacturing facility. You'd see it increasingly in our manufacturing facilities today at GE Aerospace. But it's much more than that. And that's what I think we learned in our studying of Toyota back at Danaher. And it's very much the mindset that I brought to GE. It really is all about three principles at the end of the day: respect for people, continuous improvement, or in the Japanese, kaizen, and a focus on the customer. Now, you might think those are the simplest, most basic principles in business, and they are. I often talk about lean being common sense, vigorously applied. But if you really respect the people who do the work, and you see yourself as serving them because they ultimately touch the customer, if no matter how successful you are, you're always looking for opportunities to get better. And regardless of where you sit in an organization, if you're focused on the customer, or at least the person you serve who serves the customer, that begins to turn, as Jim Collins would say, the flywheel that I think not only drives truly sustainable, outstanding results, but forges a culture where people are respected, everyone's looking to do better together to serve the customer.
So in many ways, it's about the people. It's about the people who are working at the company and the people that you're serving. It's a people business, no matter what business it is.
And if you go back to Culp welding, I think that's one of the things that I appreciated back then, be it a customer, be it the people who were working for the company. I saw my grandfather's payroll register, and you see individual names and very small numbers, right? But that was the essence of the business. We just do it at scale today.
And you still, talking about continuous improvement, you still improve yourself. You have a sensei that works with you and helps you. I think some people would look at you and say, he was amazing at Danaher and created a tremendous value. I think the market cap at Danaher during your time as CEO went up 5-fold or something. You've been super successful at GE. So why does Larry still need help?
Well, we've put up some good numbers and it was a team effort, but there are a lot of things I don't do all that well. But Katahira-san, who is approaching 80, is a real master of these lean techniques. He helped me very early in my career begin to understand how you could take those ideas, those principles, and actually apply them in a business and do so at scale. We have him working with our teams on a regular basis at GE Aerospace today. In fact, he just hosted a dozen of our senior leaders in Japan for a week-long study mission.
Wow.
Going to the best companies, not only observing, but discussing what did you see, what can you take back to your own company. So he helps me see opportunities, not only in terms of how I manage and lead, but also the company, always in an inspirational way. But he's tough. He's demanding, very much in the spirit of Kaizen.
And so he's a consultant to you and also your company.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But I don't use the word consultant. I use sensei because he really gets in close and cares about not only what we do, but how we do it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I can see how that can be impactful as well, because he's had 50 years of success in doing these kinds of things.
His pattern recognition, Mike, is off the charts. But we have June or July of 19, when we were just underway at GE, brought together over 100 leaders at our Greenville, South Carolina manufacturing facility for a week-long Kaizen event. Katahira-san led it. speaks completely through a translator, even when he's yelling at you. But he starts those weeks.
Does the translator yell?
No, it's it's toned down.
Toned it down a little bit.
But in terms of just setting tone, right, and delivering messages, he starts and finishes all those weeks bringing up the people who work on the shop floor, giving them a round of applause, thanking them in advance for the work they're going to do, right? And he does the same thing at the end of the week. So you get away from this management workforce dynamic, right? It's one team out there trying to drive improvement.
I think that's excellent. So speaking of that improvement, specifically at GE, how have you used Lean to transform GE in many ways?
Probably a lot of examples, Mike, but I think at the core, what we've really tried to do is focus on problem solving. And what I mean by that is making sure that, frankly, we embrace our problems because they are opportunities to improve or Kaizen, right? Both in the near term by containing a problem that may be impacting the business, perhaps a customer, and longer term, getting to root cause, really understanding the nature of that problem, as we say, being able to turn it on and turn it off,
right,
and put in true, sustainable corrective actions. You're making a market in problems,
right?
Celebrating the people who bring them forward, celebrating the people who solve them is, I think, at the heart of what we've been trying to do and embodies respect for people, continuous improvement, and focus on the customer.
But you're known like that as a leader. So you're known as this team first mentality. Sometimes CEOs, it's hard for them to do that. For you, it's not. So what advice do you have for other CEOs about team first mentality and humility? How do you get other leaders to think that way?
I think the advice is easy. I think it's really the role modeling at the end of the day that's important. We'll talk a lot at GE about how none of us do anything that really matters solely by ourselves.
Right.
So let's not say I, let's not say me, right? The vocabulary matters a lot. Through the course of a typical day, what I try to do is set an example. Are you really asking questions, trying to learn, trying to help people understand, or are you issuing orders?
Mm-hmm.
There can be a rather subtle difference, but at the end of the day, it's actually quite stark. And those are the sorts of things that I think are important for leaders at any level of the organization. You and I both know the thin air of CEO can make that particularly challenging, but it makes it all the more important for people.
Totally agree. Culture here at Capital Group, and we've talked about this, but it's super important. How is culture important at a Danaher or a GE? Does culture drive a business?
Totally. And I go back to 1988 when I went to business school, studying culture, organizational behavior, thinking this isn't going to matter too much. And the irony was when I retired and I went back to teaching, that's what I taught.
Right.
Because
full circle,
right? Yep. It took me a little while to understand the depth and the importance. But for us, we talk about using our lean principles and our lean tools to drive financial results, to drive operating results, and to deliver on the long-term strategic breakthroughs that we're aiming to deliver. And if we do that in the right way, we create this culture that I was alluding to earlier around respect for people, Kaizen,
right,
and the customer. And I think it's the culture, which is often the mortar in between the bricks, that makes strong results sustainable and predictable over time.
Yeah, it weaves everything together. And in your world, making sure that bad news gets to you quickly and to your leaders quickly is important, but it's not easy to do. No, in my seat, people don't love bringing bad news to anyone ever about anything. How do you create a culture where that's meant to be what happens, that people know that's the expectation?
Right. Well, I think you have to, again, make a market in problems. Problems typically are bad news, right? And if the CEO can't handle bad news, if the CEO ends up shooting the messenger, you're not going to make that market, right? Bad news will not travel as quickly as you or I might like. So I learned a long time ago that you need to embrace those problems. You need to encourage people to bring them forward and get into problem-solving mode. I may be steaming mad on the inside, but that doesn't do anybody any good. Okay, thank you for bringing that forward. What do we understand about it? How do we contain it here and now? And how do we get to root cause to fix it long term? And I think slowly we've begun to drive that sort of cultural change at GE Aerospace. We're far from perfect, But when people sit on problems, when bad news takes a while to travel my way, I'll also make it crystal clear that that isn't what we're looking for. That's not the sort of behavior that's acceptable.
Yeah, it's interesting. We face problems here like any company. I find capital groups at its best when we're solving a problem together. Things just seem to move quickly when you're solving a problem.
Same applies at GE Aerospace. Yeah. We talk about the culture we're trying to build. One of the core building blocks is collaborative problem solving.
Right.
And that's not just working cross-functionally. And I'm just so proud of how much more of that we do within our company, but also more frequently with customers and with our suppliers. We'll let everybody just leave their jerseys at the door, come in, and what's the issue? I don't care if it's a problem from a supplier or a customer or us. What's the issue? Let's get the best brains on it. Let's move at pace, contain it, and get to root cause.
You spend a lot of time traveling. We talked about that just beforehand. We both do, but you spend a lot of time traveling, and you spend some time at the manufacturing facilities, sometimes announced visits, sometimes unannounced visits. But what do those visits look like? To walk people through, Larry Culp, CEO, shows up at a manufacturing facility. How much is pre-planned? How much is performative? How much is you spending time with individuals on the quote unquote shop floor? Like, how does a visit work?
Right. Well, they're all different, but they're similar, right? And one reason I try not to give too much notice is because I think there's a tendency for it to be performative,
right?
For it to be some sort of state visit. And that's the last thing I want in our company. I want to see reality. I want to go to what we call Gemba, the place where the real work is performed, and see that reality. But we'll spend as little time as possible in the conference room. We'll walk the floor. Mm-hmm. I'm very keen to try to follow the flow of the actual manufacturing process. Does it make sense? Is it logical? Is it visual? Can you see what's normal and what's abnormal? And as people are walking around, is the factory clean? Do people look you in the eye, or are they looking at their shoes when they walk by? Can you ask people questions and get answers that are consistent with what you're hearing from senior leadership? Just a number of different checks and probes, but also, frankly, teaching opportunities, because there's no test being administered, right? I'm there to check in and see how the team's doing, but to try to help the team be better after I leave.
And so would you say that every one of those visits, you learned something about that facility that you hadn't known before you arrived?
Always.
Always.
Always. I learned something about the facility. I learned something about the leadership team and, frankly, the company at large.
So thinking about GE Aerospace's core business, at any time, there's about 1 million people in the air on an aircraft that has something that GE does on that aircraft. That's a huge responsibility. How do you get the entire workforce at GE Aerospace to think about that front of mind in everything they do? Because not all of those 1 million people in the air love flying.
By and large, what we have on board those airplanes are the engines. Those engines are allowing those people to stay aloft, right, to defy gravity. We talk often about our purpose at GE Aerospace, which is to invent the future of flight, lift people up, and bring them home safely. And you can underscore that safely, right, in every one of those conversations. We start every meeting with a safety moment, often focused on product safety and everything that we do to make sure that we learn from anything that can be improved, often from experiences in the field that the flying public never knows about, but where we might have seen an abnormality. And then within our lean operating system, which we call Flight Deck, we talk about our operating priorities of safety, quality, delivery, and cost, always in that order. So it's one thing to talk about it in a purpose statement. It's another thing to start every meeting talking about safety. But then when we get into our operating plans and our operating KPIs, safety is front and center.
Everybody knows it. Safety first.
Everybody knows it.
Right. All right, we're going to pivot into advice, this being the power of advice. You've given a lot of great advice already, but what's the best advice that you've received in your career? We all get lots of advice. We all give lots of advice, but sometimes it's hard to narrow it down. What's the best advice that you've received?
Mike, I think it probably goes back to my good friend Tony Saccone, who helped me early in my career, in particular, fresh out of business school. One time I remember he said, "Larry, just trust your gut." And I think he could see me maturing as a decision maker.
Right.
I had a chance to run my first all-in P&L at the age of 30. Very lucky in that regard. But when you come out of business school, sometimes you think the analytics will take you always to the right answer. And I think he could see that I was wrestling at times in that way. And that was, I think, excellent advice that has stood the test of time.
And when you are now outside of business, you go to Harvard Business School, you act as a professor, not act, you are a professor. What advice do you give folks? Is that the same advice you give, trust your gut? Or what are some of the one or two things that you say to your students? Because you're trying to set them out and not make some of the mistakes that you made. We all try to get people to not make our mistakes, and they have to make their own.
Yeah.
But what's your advice when there's some of these students at HBS?
Mike, I think a lot of what we've talked about probably comes through in those conversations. Something we haven't talked about, though, that was always front and center for me when I was with those MBA students, was the idea of being substantive, not superficial. And I don't want to sound like an old guy here, but in the age of PowerPoint, it's easy to be superficial, right? I think with social media, it's easy sometimes to be superficial. And I've just always believed that if you're substantive in what you do, almost regardless of where you do it, business or elsewhere, rather than falling prey to some of those superficial traps, you're going to be impactful, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that the getting away from anything performative and what are we doing here?
Right.
The substantive part it's great advice to give people. You and Wendy and your adult kids, I think we call them your adults, you ever get time to spend with just the core family? You know, you're running around the world. You got a lot going on as the CEO of GE Aerospace. Do you ever get time with the core family?
Oh, sure. I mean, getting the nuclear five, as we'll call it, together is important, whether it's in the summertime at the beach, on vacation, or maybe a golf trip, holidays, of course, the occasional concert.
Those kinds of things.
They come home.
They come home. Yeah. If you build it, they will come. Speaking of summers, in the Cape this last summer, you and I had a chance to go fishing together. One of us is a fisherman, one is not. You are the fisherman. I'll just tell folks right away. It's a hobby of yours. I do have a photo somewhere for those folks who are listening. Just so you know, I am showing a photo of Larry. He's got his Boston Red Sox hat on. We'll leave that to the side for a minute. But he's holding a very large fish on the boat. Will you describe it for our listeners?
Sure, Mike. This is a 325-pound giant bluefin tuna that you and I caught off the...
You caught it. Let's be clear.
Well, you took the picture right there.
Yeah, I took the picture.
That we were fortunate to catch right there in the middle of August when the giant bluefin are in the Cape Cod area. It's a tremendous fishery. We were about 26 miles off the beach. You can see the sea is as flat as could be. You don't catch them every day, but they are great fun when you do.
I did catch a little fish afterwards, and I think we have a picture of that. And I want you to get a sense. So Larry's fish is 325 pounds. And to say that I caught this fish is an exaggeration because someone caught it and handed me the rod. Let's just be clear. but how would you describe this fish, Larry?
Well, we were making you a fisherman that day, Mike. That's what I remember. That's a striped bass or a striper up in Massachusetts, rockfish in Maryland, where I grew up. And that probably was 12 pounds.
There you go, 12 and 325. All right, last hobby, hunting. In front of us, and I don't want to touch it because it's an antique, but will you show us what this duck decoy is? Give us a little bit of background.
Sure. Well, growing up in Maryland, growing up near the Chesapeake Bay, hunting and fishing was something I did with my grandfather and my father really throughout my entire life. What you have here is a bit of artwork. This is a 1932 Ward Brother working decoy, hunting decoy of a female or a hen black duck. It takes me back to a lot of memories with my grandfather and my father, and of course, still love the Chesapeake and the Eastern Shore today for the environment and just all the other memories.
We had a privilege of living in that area for 10 years, my family, and what a beautiful area it is. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to hit you with a few rapid fire questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
For those who have graduated from college/university, they're in the workforce, they're contemplating business school, what do you tell them?
I think it's context dependent. It's a very personal decision. I think I lean business school, especially if it's HBS, but it's a tough call.
Yeah, it's not a sure thing like it may have been 30 or 40 years ago. There's people taking very different paths. You have an opportunity to work overseas in your 20s or 30s, take it or leave it.
Take it. I wish I had.
Personally, you're going to watch sports on TV, pro sports or college sports?
College, unless it's a Red Sox game.
All right. All right. And then fishing. If you could fish anywhere in the world for 3 straight days tomorrow, where would it be?
I'd go down and see my friend Luis on the Pacific side of Costa Rica, and we'd head out about 100 miles and find the blue marlin.
Wow, 100 miles. You and I headed, 30 miles. That was a long way. 100 miles, that's a commitment. For your own legacy, and I know you're not focused on legacy, you're focused on execution. But for your own legacy, what do you hope to leave behind?
Well, I would love to fade to dark at some point and have the new leader at GE Aerospace and the leadership team just continue to excel, and this era, this team be a distant memory. But I think for me, Mike, more than anything, again, these ideas around lean, respect for people, continuous improvement, a focus on the customer. If there's any legacy 10, 20, 30 years down the road, I'd love to see the fabric of the company, the culture, as we were talking about a moment ago, really embed those ideals.
Well, I think you'd be a great sensei yourself for many people in terms of how you not only preach what you're talking about, but how you execute in it, because you've executed incredibly well in that for the last 30 plus years. So I am going to ask you to tell us what you're grateful for in the podcast I do with our investment professionals. I always end with a moment of gratitude, and I share a mug with you. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a Capital Group mug. It says the power of advice. But the mug that we use for our investment professional says, be obsessively grateful. So what are you grateful for personally, professionally? And I'll give you the mug. I'll send it to you. I won't make you travel with it. But what are you grateful for?
Well, I think over the last 7 years, and I just marked 7 years here recently at GE, the team that persevered through those dark days of 18 and 19 when people were giving up on the company, the team that took us through the pandemic and then set us up to launch 3 global leaders, right? Not only in aerospace, but in healthcare and in energy. I'm so proud to have been on this team, to be part of it, given what we did, the history that we wrote. And I think more broadly, talked about my family, some important friends like Truman, just so many people that have helped me, mentored me along the way. There's no way that I could have enjoyed the career that I've enjoyed thus far without all of their inputs, whether it was supportive, whether it was critical, all along the way.
Well, I know the employees of GE and also of Danaher. I mean, thinking back over those 30 plus years, the employees, the customers, the shareholders appreciated you and for what you've done, but also continue to do. You got a ways to go. So for what you continue to do, thanks for joining us here. And I appreciate you and our friendship. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike.